This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity.
This is synchronicity. This is synchronicity.
Welcome to Synchronicity. My guests this week are Sean Dunn and Cass Greener from the Very 8 podcast on MindPod Network. Have I mentioned MindPod Network lately? I probably haven't, because I really haven't been focusing on it. But guess what? My dear friend Nathan continues every month. The podcasts are aggregated and put up on the site. And I know, based on the donations that come into MindPod Network, not many, but enough to make it worthwhile for me to not to be like, this is stupid, I'm not going to do this anymore. A site that is actually people enjoy and they like all the stuff put together. So that's going on. So yeah, this week we have Sean and Cass. I stopped by their place in Brooklyn. It was a great time. I did a double dose in the city, recorded another podcast with Michael Donovan. That one's very interesting. These are like two sides of the coin. It was done in the same day. You'll get a real taste of what my experience was in New York the other day. This is a long podcast that's fun. It's just a regular old conversation. At first, I honestly forgot whose podcast this was. It was just such a conversation. I was like, I guess, yeah, that's mine. Totally forgot. I was just having fun with my friends. So that's what this is. We definitely get into Jordan Peterson. You're going to hear Jordan Peterson come up a few different times on this podcast. Love talking about Jordan Peterson and finding out people's opinions. You will hear ours pretty clearly in this podcast and in subsequent podcasts. It's just one of those questions that, is a polarizing thing for most people, which I find very interesting. It's a certain type of energy surrounding that, which we directly address in this. So that's pretty fun. We talk about a whole other shit: communism, socialism, capitalism, psychedelics, revolution. I don't really fully remember. Just so much awesome stuff in this one. I know you guys are going to enjoy it because I have been re-listening to it and I just recorded it yesterday. So that's a good sign. If I can listen to myself have a conversation again that soon after, good stuff. So that's it. Thank you to Patreon patrons. You continue to support the show. Really, you offset. Let me say this very clearly, and this is cool to me. If anything else, the costs of running the show, not a lot, like $200 a month tops, are covered completely by all of the patrons of this show. That's really fucking cool. So I really appreciate that. I have truthfully, this is a confession, and this is one of the reasons I haven't been totally actively tuning into MindPod Network as a business entity. There are many reasons for that, but one of them is I've stopped paying attention to statistics and measurements related to social media, analytics. If it's a business project and I'm doing it for a client or something, of course, I'll pay attention and have to analyze that. For my own projects and creative projects, this is something I actually learned from Sean and Cass, really, because I think their ethos regarding their podcast is one of the coolest things. They're like, yeah, we don't really care. And they genuinely don't care. And shit seems to work out for them just fine. And I think that's a real trusting part. And they trust in their ability and their just belief that the universe is going to provide to them, which sounds really wooey, but in a weird way, it tends to work out. And I've noticed that myself, even just in making commitments in terms of creativity to myself, that external stuff starts to happen, and that shouldn't be surprising. Talk about this stuff all the time. It still surprises me whenever synchronicity is something like this. Shit still surprises me. So it's not something that really fades just because you have awareness of it. So that's pretty cool. What else was I talking about? I don't know. Fun episode. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the weather if it's getting nice by you. If not, enjoy that if you can. All right. I will see you at the end of this episode. Here is Sean Dunn and Cass Greener from the Very 8 podcast.
There's some websites, but I ended up getting this one from Etsy.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's really
Etsy.
cool. It's like a 14-inch log, and you just leave it outside, and it does its thing. Or you could have it inside, and it does its thing. But
in like a closet or something.
yeah,
Yeah. And they say if you like dip it in cold water for 12 to 24 hours, you can mimic the
This is really cool.
environment of winter and
Yeah.
get it to flower more often. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but
Yeah, bloom. I don't know.
my sister's been taking. My sister with epilepsy has been taking lion's mane mushrooms every day because they're really anti-inflammatory, like healing mushroom.
This is the thing.
But it's expensive.
Mushrooms are like not the new, but there's a mushroom meme going on that's been percolating obviously for a very long time, but it seems incredibly prominent right now. It's good. I'm glad that it's helping because what did I take? Reishi. I do a reishi
That helps
thing.
too. We give her that.
Yeah. It's really because they're like really interesting organisms. I think a lot of people think they come from outer space. I don't know if that theory has any validity.
I kind of think that.
Seems kind of like it.
Like it's well, I mean, mushrooms totally changed Cass and I's life. You
Yeah.
know, and it felt like something not of this earth. You know, obviously the realms of consciousness you get pushed into felt
Right.
not of this earth. And you know, the first time we ever took mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms, I had no clue what the psychedelic realm was or anything like that. We smoked a lot of weed, but we had no idea. And next thing you know, this stuff is like telling us messages very specific to our world that we needed to carry out to appease it.
What dosage did you take that for?
I would probably guess an eighth.
An eighth.
Yeah.
I heard of your heroic dose, which you did. I didn't know who Terrence McKenna was in college, and I took routinely 7 to 10 grams of
Whoa.
mushrooms.
whoa. Oh, jeez. Why would you do that again?
Okay, well, what happened with the mushrooms is you hit a point where it kind of normalized. Like, okay, so this was the situation. I had a roommate who I knew from back home who I moved in with. This is after getting switched from a previous roommate who was just like this Colorado kid who used to tell people he was a virgin in college so girls would sleep with him. Definitely wasn't. Like, probably had venereal disease. Like, just like total douchebag, not cool guy.
What a move.
So, I know. I was like, dude, he's like,
That
yeah.
works.
Apparently,
Yeah,
he was a
they're
friend.
like, I don't need to use a condom, so.
This was my first freshman roommate. So this was my first roommate. Moved out with him, moved in with this other roommate who I knew from home. Kind of a weird dude. And he immediately fell in line with like the shadiest of shady people who one of them was this drug dealer who was like had ketamine. Like we're like 18 in Boston. And this dude has like powdered, he's cooking up ketamine upstairs on a boiler. I'm like, what the fuck? Where did you meet this guy? Anyway, he one day comes in with this huge industrial sized trash bag of I don't know what. And he's like, oh, thanks for letting us do this here. I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, just like take as much as you can carry. So I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, an armful. And I open it up and it's just packed to the brim of mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms.
Wow.
Insane. So I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to waste this opportunity. So I grab like legitimately, I don't know, half a pound, like a lot of dried mushrooms, like a lot, enough. And so me and my friends, you know, for the next like, God, I don't know about time during that time period so well, did a lot of mushrooms. So like, that's how I ended up scaling up into like, all right, I'm going to do like 7 grams. I'm going to do this cap that weighs 5 grams plus this other shit. So it normalized at a certain point. But I lost that. I remember doing mushrooms after that and it was just like heavy doses. Like, you know, I'd do like a 16th, you know, a little over a gram and I'd be rocked like back in the day. So I think it was just like a period, especially in my life, where those worlds were merging so regularly that it wasn't that I was desensitized to it. Just like my conception of the world wasn't that different than what it would be like and if you were on mushrooms. And
That's LSD for us right now.
yeah. That happened to me too.
5 to 7 grams, though, is like so much. Like, I just feel like, I mean, I did 5 grams and I was like, I don't know, I was having crazy hallucinations.
The peaks are, but like mushrooms for me always lasted a lot shorter than LSD. LSD, I would basically be tripping 18 hours,
Right.
12 hours. Mushrooms, like hour 7, 6.
Oh, they're gone.
I'm I'm smoking, maybe being like, oh yeah, I don't really feel
That's
as
true.
high as-"
And
but-
even on the highest of doses.
Yeah, and it's pretty quick. It's a pretty regular, like, okay, we're up, we feel them coming up, and then we're having this really, the carpet's breathing. I forget I have to breathe at a certain point. Like, the crazy shit happens, and the lessons, and the what. But, you know, after that, it is kind of a drift back into normalcy, so to speak, where I remember LSD, that merging, you know, in various levels on the spectrum would just, you know, there's no difference anymore. Like, that's what I think it was, just like a little, and I used to tell people that when they were tripping, and it freaked some people out. I was like, you don't really need the acid. Like, you don't need it. Like, I get it, but like, it's the same thing. Like, that's the whole thing. I used to tell that Maharaji story before I even knew who the fuck he was. So I am
about how he took the 900 micrograms or the 1200
and didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
And the, you know, I found that to be a profound parable before I even knew who any of those people were, just because I was like, yeah, that kind of lines up with my initial psychedelic experiences also in Boston when I was like 15. You know, I was just like, oh, this is actually what's going on. Like, this is closer to what's going on than what I thought. Like, I know at least now that what I thought was going on was definitely not the whole picture. So I think the more you kind of penetrate that, it's helpful. You know, I do think that's a really valuable state, and I see people who can reliably go there and integrate that into this world, quote unquote, as a skill set. That's why I think microdosing is so big right now.
Yeah, I've definitely thought of it as like a skill I've developed over the past. Well, we took acid for the first time 3 years ago, and
How much
300 micrograms, and it was pretty far out.
is this one?
Yeah, that's 10.
Okay,
10 micrograms. But yeah, I mean, when we first took the acid, I remember that being a really, really profound thing, like almost eerie feeling of like, this is very peaceful. This is very familiar. Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember one of the first things I said was like, "Is this before or after acid?" Like, I hadn't even, I couldn't. Time was like, wait, have I done this before? I've of course done this before. Wait, what?
Yeah.
But to your point, I had read Be Here Now and those stories about Neem Karoli Baba, and like I was like, while it makes sense to me, because you know, having that firmly fixed of an eye on God, of course you're going to start to, you know, feel that way. I couldn't relate with it, and I was like, that's something to strive for, and that's been the work over the last 3 years. Is I feel like we've just integrated much more of the psychedelics into our life without having to take them all the time, but just being better people, being more mindful people. Our meditations are much deeper. They're consistent. We haven't missed. God, we never miss meditating twice a day for 4 years, and it started with the mushrooms.
You're like the opposite me.
Well, we hear people say that a lot of people are like, "Oh, I need to meditate more." Like even like people like yourself, I'm like, well,
I don't even say that anymore. I've given up the aspiration to meditate, somewhat in the hopes that when I have it, I'll do it.
So you don't even feel like doing it?
No, because like if I feel like doing it, it's rare that I'll reliably put it aside. Like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I just don't think to do it. If I was coming up a lot and I was like, I'm not going to do that, I'd probably do it. Because then I'd be like, oh, I'm clearly resisting something there. Also, again, to speak, we were talking before, I didn't have any fucking time to, like, I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, like,
you need time.
In my regular life, and I know you can meditate 2-3 minutes a day, I can't meditate when I smoke weed. I can't do it. It doesn't mean that that's why I don't meditate. It's that my mind needs a certain level of baseline kind of normalcy, for lack. It's not normalcy, but just like not a lot of stuff going on. When I like to smoke, I like to have thoughts and think and creativity and all of those things. That's why I don't smoke. I also need space around that to achieve that baseline. When I'm stressed out, the idea of trying to meditate, and I know that's probably the best time, it's just like can't. It just like it doesn't feel like I have the space to sit down. And I really do think that is an environment, and you could be able to theoretically meditate anywhere, but like creating in a nice environment for yourself.
I think you have high standards for your meditation, and it's like
maybe.
I don't know. For me, I'm like, I can't not do it because it's just such a crucial recharge. Like, even if I just spend the whole time with my mind going crazy, like just like watching it go crazy, I mean, that's everything.
I have not found the place where that brings me some added benefit into my practical life yet. I think it's probably just due to my own impatience more than anything else.
I wonder if it's like a personality trait. Like, are you more of an extroverted person?
That's absolutely not. I'm incredibly introverted. I'm an extroverted introvert, meaning in a social situation, I can seem very extroverted and, get along with anyone. But truthfully, like, I'm most happy, like, by myself, creating something, whether it's pleasant or not, like having that's like what I prefer to do. I'm a homebody. So I like that, but meditation has been, I've done it regularly too. It's just something that, man, when I'm stressed out, I can't. It's not like I enjoy like, oh, there's my mind. It's like, I'm particularly agitated and this is uncomfortable. Probably should lean in.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like Cass said, it became the first time we did it, the first time we ever meditated, we do TM because we just didn't even know where to start or where to begin. So we just went over and took these classes, and they teach you on the first day, and you start repeating a mantra in your head, and all of a sudden 20 minutes later you come out of it, somebody comes over and they're like, okay, cool. And I'm like, that was it? I was like, they're like, yeah. I'm like, that felt like 2 minutes, and also, I feel incredible. I'm never not doing that. I'm never not doing that. Like, that's, I like, holy shit, I needed that so badly. Same thing.
What's
with
your
Grateful
mantra?
Dead,
Now you have to tell me your secret mantra. No, I know. That's the secret. Maybe you just got a really good one. You guys just got really good ones.
Well, Cass actually had a hard time the first couple days, and was beating herself up. Well, and it's hard to get into a groove. And,
I still have a hard time. I'll be honest.
Too,
Sometimes I do a whole meditation. I don't even touch my mantra once, and it's like, well, I know other techniques, which is like breathing or loving kindness meditations.
Yeah,
and like
that was my favorite. I was down with the loving. I should do that one again. That one I actually really like.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like, once you have a foundation for your practice, like us, for us, it's TM. Then we decorate it with so many other things. Now we're like, fuck it, let's chant it. Let's do some chanting. Let's do breathing like this.
I do
all
like
in
that.
addition to it. And what we've noticed is, I think for me, it's a focus thing. When we're meditating and we're doing it right and everything's good, there's just much more focus in our life. And we played on a dart team competitively.
Bullseye.
Well, when we and the funny thing is, we microdosed every single week, so I couldn't even tell you if the microdose helped or not, because we didn't ever.
There's no baseline.
Yeah, but we did do it, testing it without meditating a couple times, and those were our worst weeks. No focus. Like the focus wasn't there.
it makes everything easier. I feel like.
Yeah, it makes things easier.
I don't know. Life
That
can
doesn't
feel
sound
particularly hard to me sometimes, but if I just like.
I wonder. Yeah. No, all the evidence does line up that it is a good thing to do. There are both people. You guys know, I have a weird relationship with the mindfulness scene in general, just meditation, which is throwing the baby out with the bathwater in some respect, and I don't. That's why I don't think this is, nonsense.
We don't listen to any of it. Like, whatever people are preaching out there, I don't even know. I have no
that's why
idea
you guys
what the experts
you
are
guys
or what they're doing.
You're special cases.
We're like in a little bit of a bubble.
That's good.
We took mushrooms, and it compelled us to want to nurture the path back to that oneness, and meditation seemed like a way we could do that on the natch. And now we have other ways of doing it, but meditation's never not gonna be a part of it. And it doesn't make us better or more disciplined or anything like that. It's just like, I literally desperately needed that. I couldn't take psychedelics if we didn't have meditation.
I haven't.
I really, really would not fuck with those realms unless I had more access to them on my day to day.
That's what's so great about psychedelics, because I feel like I live my life in order to honor what my experience on psychedelics will be, and I try to have a psychedelic experience that will honor my life. So both of them kind of inform each other.
That's a very profound thing that I'm going to have to listen to again to really unpack. That's a really practical way of integrating two different sides to an experience.
It's a great practical way to live a life of service. You're honoring yourself and your experience, and you're trying to keep it on a certain level in your day to day, so that when you go to take these psychedelic trips and go really far out, that there's a tether.
Yeah.
there. And then when you do go really far out, you want to go really far out so you know what the deep end is like.
I just know how crazy it is when you forget to breathe, and I'm just not interested in that.
That's what I was saying. When I did mushrooms in college, I convinced myself I didn't know how to breathe. Literally, I was like, "Whoa!" And it was probably
crazy.
Yeah, in real time, it was probably like 4 seconds. In my mind, I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm dying!"
Wow.
Like I don't know how to do this anymore. I was like, "Okay." It's like someone probably didn't notice it looking at me. I'm just spewing something out. Yeah.
We've been listening to. You ever listen to Robert Anton Wilson or read any of his stuff?
So funny. Of course, it's him, Chapel Paris. Okay, you realize I've been jogging again with my newfound time.
Well, that's great. That's as good as a meditation, man.
I love it, and it's so hard now because I hadn't done it in a while. I love it. I've been listening to. I'm pointing at my phone. Robert Anton Wilson explains everything.
Oh yeah. Oh, cool. Critical listening.
What's so interesting about it is it was recorded, I think, like 2000 or something like that. Sounds like you're talking about now. Like it is, and it's one of those things you realize, like, holy shit, he penetrated enough to be able to speak about anything, even if it's the most culturally political specific time period thing that is so timeless.
Yeah.
That is just incredible. I didn't discover him until I went to the beach last year, which I'm going to again soon. Right when Sirius was visible, I listened to Cosmic Trigger for the first time, and he was talking about a point in his life in Cosmic Trigger where shit was just going bad. Like he had, left his job at Playboy. Like shit was going bad, and I was in such a similar position at the beach. And I'm like, and Sirius was there, and the whole book's about Sirius. I was like, what the fuck? So I love Robert Anton Wilson.
Oh my god, he's some sort of prophet. It was like, it was such a relief when we found him. Remember that feeling, like, oh god,
Like I needed another chosen father to enter my world right now.
So good.
Yeah. The one that we really love is the acceleration of knowledge, which I think is within the Robert Anton Wilson Explains Anything. I think one of the parts is called the acceleration of knowledge.
Yeah.
That one will, and he has this way of doing it kind of in like a George Carlin way.
Yeah.
Very loose and conversational New York, hanging out. But what he's doing is like in that process, he's piercing the veil and then burning the veil and then melting your face.
So awesome.
In a very simple, like
Matter of
matter of
fact.
fact, kind of slow paced.
Oh, it's great.
With a little sense of humor about it.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
A lot of little tangential, little parenthetical, like, oh, and by the way, and there's when I listen to him, I'm like jotting shit down.
Oh
and
my God.
Fucking a million tabs open, trying to just
so
catch all these
funny.
references because, man, he's on McKenna's level in terms of that.
I would-
Well read and
Here's the thing. I love McKenna. I don't take most of what McKenna says all that seriously. The vast majority of it I take, and some of this is because, I haven't taken psychedelics macro dose in almost 10 years. So I have no pejorative experience. Oh, it's coming.
come hang out Saturday night, full
where-
moon gathering.
Full moon. You guys take it on the full moon. We'll talk about that. But towards the end of his life, the last 10, 15 years, he wasn't taking psychedelics, which doesn't mean anything to me in terms of we should take him seriously or not seriously. But I think so many people put what he said towards the beginning and even in the end when he was just whimsically saying stuff, which is why I love Terrence McKenna. He's one of my favorite people. The eloquence of which he offers ideas, novel ideas, is like my favorite thing. It's like
It's what paved the way for what we're doing.
I couldn't imagine anyone better to like squire that in. So like Robert Anton Wilson, the reason I put him above McKenna is there's a groundedness level of his experiences growing up also with a family, with a wife that is very relatable to people like me who
New York Irish Catholic. I mean,
yeah,
come on,
yeah, there
man.
you go. Right? Which is like weirdly when I hear him talk, I'm like, man, this guy sounds like a Jewish guy too.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's
he
this
does.
very interesting way about him, but there's this practicality and this looseness about life, and watching someone go through the householder's role and play that dance, I think is fucking cool because I think a lot of people think that, when you get married or you have a kid or you're in a relationship, that kind of dies down and like, the magic can be lost. And that's just bullshit. Like, it's hilarious to me that you mentioned Robert Anton Wilson because there's, obviously, as you know, he talks about synchronicities very often. He's listen, the more, what does he call it? Secret Cosmic Control Center. The more you prod that shit, the more they pop up. So it's funny how he himself has become kind of a meme for synchronicity and offers those up, which, yeah.
Well, the reason that we keep taking psychedelics is to prod that control center for us. And like, I mean, to me, for us, I would say it's important that we keep doing this. It's important that we keep doing this work with psychedelics and continue it, hopefully, for the rest of our lives.
I really appreciate Michael Pollan, who's going around, who did The Omnivore's Dilemma. He's going around saying, like, yo, everyone should be doing this on their birthday, like a check-in.
Once a year.
A
check-in.
I think that is incredibly wise advice.
Well, what we have to do is culturally pave the way for that. And we've noticed it in the 4 years we've been doing psychedelics, and we started this podcast because of the mushrooms and everything. We've noticed it go from something you literally can't bring up around your family to something the most conservative people in your family are coming up to you saying, so do you know how to get mushrooms?
It's like crypto.
Yes, it kind of, yeah.
Oh, there's a connection there. We don't have to get into it, but no, I agree. The fact the Pollan book, that's crazy. I don't think people realize how big of a deal that will be in the future when we look back and be like, oh, like that was a big kind of like tipping point for this because our parents all knew who Michael Pollan is. There are people who watch Netflix on his Cooked special. He's well known. The Omnivore's Dilemma, like very profound book. This is going to hit a lot of people. And I didn't know he's advocating for a once a year annual check-in. I think that's
he was
really
saying
good
that
advice.
shit on Stephen Colbert. Talk about mainstream.
And we're not marveling that this is some profound thing to do. We're marveling that this is getting out to mainstream.
It's like finally.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what the impact will be.
Well, it'll be, the same impact we hope to have with this podcast is like the destigmatization and normalization so people can consider psychedelic healing because, I think, what people who aren't having a tough go at it mentally don't consider is what it's really like for people who are dealing with anxiety and PTSD and debilitating depression or all this stuff that can be dealt with through psychedelics.
And it's currently being dealt with drugs that don't work and are actually very harmful.
Yeah. So it just like we need to have that shift culturally within ourselves and say, no, this is important. Like when I look at it and when I look at the studies and the statistics, especially with marijuana and psilocybin, I'm like, holy shit. This country isn't having a mental health problem. It's having a mushroom deficiency. Like we need these mushrooms. We've needed this all along. We've relied on these things probably until the past, blink of an eye in human history. We've relied on these things to guide us, to help us know ourselves. Yeah. And I think that's what Michael Pollan is really going to help people understand with this book is like, this is a way of getting to know who you are again. That cuts through all the cultural programming. This is a way to get to know who you are again, and that's where the healing starts.
Yeah.
It's a political revolution in the making because it'll be like the war on consciousness, which Graham Hancock talks so beautifully about. But that's what people are going to continue to realize, like with marijuana, like, wait, I'm not allowed to do this.
Let me play the Robert Anton Wilson chaos magician here for a second. I mean, I agree. No, I couldn't possibly agree more. And maybe just because I listened to him speak about this stuff, it does seem like there are plenty of opposing forces where we're in New York right now. We live in what is thought of a very liberal state, a very blue state. No, it's not. There's some of the strictest laws for marijuana in this state relative to the entire East Coast.
It's the marijuana arrest capital of the world.
It's insane. And New Jersey's about to legalize. Massachusetts is legalized. Vermont, New Hampshire. So it seems like, but they're fucking fighting it tooth and nail. Yeah. So to me, if marijuana is being fought this far, which is the dumbest of fights, it's just like a dumb fight. Not even if you think, unless you think it's actually really just killing people at an alarming rate. That's the only reason. If you thought that somehow it brings in revenue, it makes people gentler, kinder, it can make people deal with their issues. You don't have to do it. It's not compulsory. We're not saying you have to smoke weed. If they're fighting that so hard, it does, even on the flip side of the pollen stuff, wonder, like, Robert Anton Wilson is talking about it. We take it for granted at this point. It seems like corporations and special interests, like, truthfully run the shit. And cryptocurrency has really helped expose this layer for me, because it's like, oh man, these people who I thought were like fighting the good fight, some of them, like, oh no.
Well, here's what it all comes down to. This is a paragraph from Michael Pollan's book, and this speaks to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical drug industry, whose 10 largest companies, all publicly owned, earned around $440 billion in revenue in 2014, when global revenue of legal drugs exceeded $1 trillion for the first time, would lose probably tens to eventually hundreds of billions of dollars annually if psychedelics became legal.
Yeah.
Because hundreds of millions of people could then cheaply and effectively and sustainably, instead of expensively, ineffectively, toxically, and fatally, relieve and or treat depression, anxiety, addiction, pain, inflammation, insomnia, nausea, epilepsy, cancer, asthma, dementia, arthritis, fibromyalgia, cluster headaches, PTSD, OCD, ADHD, Tourette, and other problems with cannabis, psilocybin, DMT, salvia, LSD, mescaline, and ibogaine. As users of psychedelics have known or suspected for millennia, Aboriginals have known for tens to hundreds of millennia, and science has begun to confirm since the 50s in two main waves of research, the second beginning 2006 at Johns Hopkins and New York University.
Yeah. I mean, his gamble, that's awesome. And
that's what it all comes down to. These companies know exactly what's going on, and they're going to lose hundreds of billions of dollars.
That's my point. And Michael Pollan's gamble, and what we're excited about potentially, is that information and knowledge will liberate this shackle. I would say I'm probably less optimistic of psychedelics being legalized in the near future than I was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. Specifically because of what seems like people are having a hard time discerning between like relatively plain truths about the world now. This is such a nebulous, and even we would admit sometimes a psychedelic experience, if we didn't have the experiences we had and weren't the people we were, would probably not be pleasant or even necessarily beneficial if someone didn't want to confront and face some of those things. So it puts it in a category that I think is behind some of these other things that we have to, like, I think we have a better chance of loosening like the prison industrial complex potentially, which is very powerful too. I don't think as powerful as the pharmaceutical companies. I'd be interested to see that. But, I think subversively, this book has the cultural, like, mimetic power to like really do what we're talking about. I think if enough people, maybe it is just that people don't know in power positions that this could help their dying loved one or someone going through a difficult experience. Or it could be they do know, but they also know that, the system also supports their life as they know it. So I don't know. It's an interesting dance that's being played out.
People need to get serious and demand this shit because...
what do you guys do for political stuff? I'm thinking about this. I got Faso up there. He's a Republican.
Oh.
He's just like, my county is... both Dutchess is leaning both ways. It's slowly turning blue, but this dude's like a dick. He supported every like bad Trump thing that he's done.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote, but what do you do?
Are you in a Trump county? Did Dutchess vote for Trump?
Yes, by like 4%.
Holy
dude,
shit.
It's so
New York rednecks.
Because
what
like,
do you mean?
seriously, that's not far outside New York City, man.
Columbia County right up there, I think, go to too. Like, you see Confederate flags in various places.
No,
like,
I know. It's bizarre.
So
they have redneck accent up there.
You know
what
it's
I
so
mean? You're like,
weird.
what the fuck? Hey, man, how you doing? I'm from motherfucking Hudson, New York. It's like, what? Yeah, man.
It's weird.
But no, we're radicals when it comes to that stuff. We're I guess politically aligned with the socialists, but more ideologically aligned with communism.
My communism. I don't know anymore because my ideas, like, I liked Bernie Sanders when that was happening.
Hell yeah.
But after getting involved in cryptocurrency stuff, unfortunately, I don't agree with a lot of everyone's opinion. They're libertarians, and libertarians, I think, have their own kind of weird white male bent that doesn't really make a lot of sense for everyone. Yeah. However, there is some very disturbing patterns of everyone in the political realm of basically that they don't actually get the shit done that they're saying should be done, not because people aren't letting them do it, but because it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Not that saying like we shouldn't have free medical care for everyone, but that the systems that they're doing, they full well know is more a vehicle for them rising through the ranks than actually promoting change. Because if someone stood up and was like, fuck this, my whole platform is legalize weed, that's all I'm going to campaign for, they'd be gone. So that's kind of like, that's why I say like, I don't know what to do. I'm not running for politics.
Well, well, first of all, we have to vote in the primaries. If you can vote in the Democratic primaries,
Nixon.
Vote for Cynthia Nixon because she's running on legalization.
I know, I'm voting for her.
And she's running on dismantling
well, fuck
prisons.
Cuomo's a dick.
He's the worst.
I know.
Man.
Sheep's and wolf in sheep's clothing.
And you know what? The thing is, his dad was the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, when I was growing up. He wasn't that bad of a guy.
That's what I hear.
He wasn't that bad of a governor, and he wasn't that bad of. I met him. I hung out with him. I did some interviews and stuff with him. But and he's a good man who's principled. His son, Andrew Cuomo. I can't even. I could go on a 2-hour rant.
I believe
about
it.
how this guy's the fucking pits.
The game's so dirty, and if you're in the game, you're playing pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And
most smart people don't. That's where maybe this has more power than we're talking about. But because subversively, people, I think a lot of smart people are like, why would I get into politics? But then does there need to be the noble torch carrying, person who does get in and takes one for the team? I don't know. Because it does still have such a massive impact on our day-to-day lives, whether we realize it or not, whether we're tuned in into not. Like, I don't mean we wake up and like, oh, the government, but like the subtle things that connect, the person down the street, these things are really, their consciousness is very much affected by this stuff. So it's just this weird kind of like, what do you do in terms of social action? It seems like, the polarization that immediately happens with any stance you take is just like I don't know where you guys stand on gun control. I don't think banning all guns solves whatever problem this is.
No, it definitely doesn't.
I don't like guns. I'm not into guns.
And when you do that, who does it inevitably come down on? Minority communities. Who does it inevitably, is the victims of that kind of thing? Who gets their guns taken? Who gets disarmed? The people that need it the most, really, when it comes down to it.
Like actual protection in dangerous situations that weren't their own creating.
I think the move is enforce monogamy.
Do you guys ever tune into Jordan Peterson shit?
No, but YouTube certainly wants me to. My whole thing, whole algorithm.
It's algorithmic.
It's
okay.
just
because you're white and you're a guy,
me.
and they think you need daddy to tell you what's going to do.
And maybe if you listen
might
because
be
you listen
insecure.
to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, maybe because I click on Joe Rogan clips.
Oh God,
that comes up.
This guy is very interesting.
Jordan Peterson.
There's two characters right now who I am not fascinated with, but I note their pull on people's psyches on a mass level. One is Jordan Peterson, who's an idiot. Just let's be clear. Like, I don't know, let's just sidestep that whole thing. He's a ding dong, and like has a seemingly good enough intellectual grasp on Jungian concepts. He doesn't know shit.
He's a dipshit.
He doesn't.
He creeps me out first and foremost because he describes himself as a traditionalist, and that couldn't be further away from the way I look at things and the way things should be a traditionalist. Fuck you.
What he means is he's an idiot. The other is Kanye West, who I love.
Yeah.
Many people don't like that I love, or think that I'm crazy. To me, Jordan Peterson is this person who has clearly figured out how to not manipulate, but gain attention and awareness through the channels that exist. It's a very clever, highly verbal, intellectual wordplay thing that works for our online culture and for how people want to hear things debated. And his perspective happens to lean to a demographic that has money, whether it's their parents or their own, to support that type of whatever it is. I also know some really smart people. My friend Adam Summer, who runs the Exploring Astrology podcast, which is great and is pretty damn fucking woo-woo, really finds Jordan Peterson compelling. So there's something else there.
He's
that is
hypnotized.
it's something. Oh, and I couldn't agree more. And he hates Kanye West. I'm like, oh, what's going on? The reason I think Kanye is so
hip to
interesting, Kanye's a mystic. Kanye is not someone who has any control over any logical, as far as I can tell, any logical reasoning capability relative to the rest of the world. When he has a thought, he thinks it's the first time anyone has ever had that thought, and everyone needs to know about it. Like, truly, you see it. It's like if you do acid with someone and they're like, oh my God, like, what if this isn't real? It's like, yes.
Dude, I hate doing acid with those kind of people.
I haven't.
Is anyone else realizing that we're made of love? You know, it's like, calm down. We're all having our own thing.
That was me for 3 months, by the way. If you hated that, imagine just the person who came around. That's all they would talk about 24/7.
I'm fine with that. That's kind of how we are, but I can't handle during the trip people like being like, "Can I just take everyone into exactly what I'm going through right now?" No. It'd be like getting to narrate your dream in real time. It's like, just stop. No. You know, speaking of Kanye, that I think probably the most compelling documentary I've seen all year was the extended cut of when he went into TMZ Live.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That was good, right? You're a documentary, you know. Good.
Human
Thank
moment.
Thank you.
And what a real cultural moment. And when that guy confronts him and says, Kanye, man, you're
You know
off.
what the fuck is going on?
You're off here. It's wild. It's so real.
That's why I love. He's a mystic.
He's scrambling to compensate, and like he doesn't
know. That's why I love it. Kanye. People want to think that they want to be mad at Kanye because he's dumb related to shit that you're asking this dude who, you know, lost his mom, is at a level of fame that almost no one can understand. Almost no one. There are very few people who can understand that level of fame. And I put him higher than just like other regular like acting and cultural fame. When there's a piece of music that's timeless that can get played over and over again, and that pattern that's really quite an amazing thing.
There.
Yeah. And his music is truly incredible, which leads me to the mystic thing. So I don't think he's just like this. And every description I've heard of him, Jay-Z on Dave Letterman thing was pretty cool when they talk about Kanye, because he's like, yeah, Kanye would just like jump on the table and start yelling shit, and they're like, Kanye, get the fuck, what's the matter with you?
Holy shit.
Because he's just like nuts. He's like a kid,
Yeah.
and I think he's thrust into like this very difficult position, and people don't take that into consideration because they think he's Kanye and he should take it and he should know better. And it's like, nah, he's like, he doesn't know what the fuck is going on. He's a highly creative person who luckily can channel that into music for us to hear, because otherwise he'd probably be on the streets. No one knows the fuck this way. He's definitely like, but I don't think he's crazy, like crazy. I just think that people have a hard time seeing what he's putting out. And I think if you get it, he's incredibly enjoyable. And of course needs to be like G-checked and be like, dude, slavery wasn't a choice. What the fuck are you talking about? Like,
he brings people out of their little shells though, because then people go around being like, oh yeah, I agree with Kanye on that.
See, I like, and that's the energy. That's the Jordan Peterson energy that I think is a cultural meme right now. And it's weird because I don't know how to relate to that.
The Jordan Peterson thing scares the shit out of me.
Really?
Oh, and I mean, in a way, you know, like these crypto kids we know, they love him and they worship him. They worship him.
That's scary.
You know, and I'm just like, why? Like, I don't feel like listening to all this guy's lectures to find out what it is you like about him. But if you want to know about archetypes and this and that, like, there's just much fucking cooler people like Joseph Campbell who you could listen to, or Robert Anton Wilson,
or Marie-Louise von Franz, who he'll never bring up because he's a fucking idiot, and that was Jung could not have done. First of all, anyone who's read Jung, anyone who's like really fucking read Jung, they know a very plain, simple truth. The dude was a shitty fucking writer. He didn't know how to write. He was overly complex in every fucking thought he ever had. He was not and this was also part of his training, where he was, his era, his culture. Marie-Louise von Franz, who was his primary translator, wrote on fairy tales, myth. Ironically, interestingly, played kind of inverted roles energy-wise. She was kind of like more logical and analytic and masculine in that sense, and he was more like arty and like drawing shit and like doing weird things and having crazy experiences. But she was able to write very eloquently on a ton of shit, and like she synthesized a lot of his work and put it into like very clear terms, equally complex and not like easy light reading, but like much better. And like Jordan Peterson's not going to mention her.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing. And when these crypto kids or anyone that's worshiping this guy, denies that it's about anything but further justification for their like bigotry.
It's so. What is your point?
Like,
I know.
It's like, no, I really like the way he talks about archetypes and mythologies, and it's like, really,
Dude.
or do you like him yelling at transgender people, or do you like him owning libs? You know, like, get the fuck out of here. There's these huge industries right now that are really, really sucking people in and convincing them that liberals and liberal-minded people are their issue. And Jordan Peterson is like some sort of, like, he comes along and he's
the Pied Piper.
Yeah.
Dude, he's his lobster thing. Everyone
Oh
quotes
my
this shit to me,
God.
and I'm like, I saw a really good video. Have you had Jason Louv on?
No.
You can never link up with him. I think he's in LA. He's awesome, but
Cool.
he posted some video of this trans woman. What's her name? God, I can't remember it. But she just had this really concise, hilarious takedown of Jordan Peterson, and she focused on the lobster thing. That just came to mind. The lobster thing is the dumbest thing ever because they're lobsters, and to draw on a hierarchical society that are lobsters and not people, like
What's the
that's-
lobster thing? I don't know the lobster thing.
Okay. Do you want to explain
No,
it?
go
Okay,
for
so
it.
the lobster thing is basically that they fall their serotonin increases when they dominate other lobsters, and that's their society, and that's how things should work, and it creates a balance in the lobster society. So he gets dubbed the lobster king. That's what all these people think.
saying
It's-
like that's
again-
an example of why the patriarchy
Yeah,
works,
yeah,
and that's it taking place in nature.
This is when things aren't. Women are chaos, and if the chaos, I'm sorry to tell you that women are chaos. And, yeah, such a-
tell you
that
women are chaos.
and it's just like, man, I don't know.
Last grasp of like white male supremacy.
Hopefully.
I hope it's a last grasp.
I
Gross.
just it's a clever one is what it is though, because
Well, because it sucked in people that I think otherwise think of themselves as progressively minded.
and I think there are things that he says that probably have true. I remember someone mentioned Jordan Peterson to me 2 or 3 years ago, and they were like, you should have him on the podcast, and I sent him an email because I didn't know who he was. I was like, "You know what I mean?" I got a thing back, and then I think like a month later the whole shit happened
Yeah.
with the university or something like that. And so then I had watched some of his videos, and I was like, it's like, that's fine. Like, it didn't speak to me. It didn't was like, oh my god, this is amazing. But it was like, maybe some truth in something out there. So I'm sure there's
He has
some.
hours of stuff. Of course, he's going to hit on something every now and then. It's like he's just fucking going on and on and on for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
But his alignment with the alt-right is fucking disturbing.
Well, he would say he's very clever. He's just kind of a dick. Here's my overall summation, and maybe this is a wrong analysis of him. And I have watched some of his videos, and I have read some of what he writes, and I've watched debates. I just think he's kind of angry. He seems like he's a hurt
Yeah.
boy who thinks that this restores some types of cosmic justice in people's lives, and it's like, dude, like, you're Freuding it up. You're conflating your personal experience for like your archetype has broken through. You see that shit. You're now famous. You should be able to fucking see this thing is busted out from your unconscious, and you're projecting it over, and you're casting this fucking shadow over yourself and all these other people. But no, you're just gonna have these gaunt fucking eyes and tired existence. I read this profile of him. It sounds like horrible.
These stupid suits that make it seem like he's from 100 years ago.
God, the poor fucking guy. Yeah. So I don't know.
I mean, that's where the compassion comes in. God, what it must be like to be him. The scrambling constantly.
For someone who likes him, like that's what you want to hear. That's what you need to hear.
That's
It's just it's a pretty. It's easy, I guess, is what it is. That's what it
Sadly,
is. It's
nowadays
12
it is.
simple rules. That's what you need. It's just one of those rules happens to be women aren't that important. No big
Clean
deal.
your room.
We'll stick that
It'll
one
just
in there.
it's so funny because it's just gonna make men and so many men less and less appealing. Like
Yup.
these feelings of entitlement that I mean I saw a headline this morning about how upstate New York parents sue 30-year-old son to get out of the fucking
Yeah,
their
I saw
house.
that too. We're getting fed the same shit. I saw that too.
Well,
Can you imagine? I was thinking about the court battle of like having to stand on the opposite side as your parents, be like, "No, I demand I stay."
Oh my
It's
God.
like, whoa, dude.
I just think like the battle lines that are being drawn are really, really disturbing, and you know, the solutions and the what is enforced monogamy and all of this type of stuff.
I must have tuned out before. What is enforced?
Enforced monogamy is what he thinks is what Jordan Peterson thinks is like
enforced.
Yeah, it's really strange language. He thinks that's what's
Yeah.
going to be the solution to all this violence, and
It's mean-spirited, it seems, at worst, and I think at best it's just insensitive. And I think it's hard to assume that he's smart. He's not dumb.
no, absolutely,
So
he
it's
definitely is.
smart people typically can identify negative things that they're doing. They can just maybe ignore them, and I think that's probably unfortunate. And I think he also he's making a fuckload of money right now. He may just have a nut he wants to reach, and then he's like, all right, let me flip the script. I changed this. The 13th rule is be nice to women. Who knows?
He's exploiting a culture we already have. We already have a rape culture, pretty much.
It's bad.
And he's
He's just a symptom of it. He's not the problem, and that's the whole thing. Like, what we can learn from him is look at his followers and look what they're talking about and what their concerns are, and what are the circumstances that led to this situation where there is a such thing as incels, involuntary celibates, and these cultures of misogyny that are bubbling up.
involuntary celibate.
Have you heard about the incels?
No, I mean, I feel like tell me about them because it's just
no.
blowing
I'm
my
surprised
mind.
if anything that I'm turning you on to this.
No, I don't know. People are
incel. It's a new thing. It's
like a
involuntary.
group.
Yeah, it's a new group. They're huge followers of Jordan Peterson, but they're
Well,
involuntary.
no shit. They're not
celibates.
fucking. Life's no good.
Yeah, they're the people who want
Sex.
enforced monogamy. They want women to
They
be
feel like they're
as,
entitled to a certain amount of sex.
yeah, as Jordan Peterson says, and he's quoted as saying this. He wants
just-
women to be more conscientious and agreeable.
So they're just mad that they were born 100 years too late. They're just tight. They're like,
where they
"Fuck
can't get away
this.
with rape.
Fuck this shit.
Well, I think there's just such a lack of purpose in our society, and I think that's kind of a symptom
Yeah.
of capitalism. And I
Yes.
think
Now we're getting
ultimately
down to
these
it.
are victims of capitalism and us not having a collaborative society where people have purpose and things that they do that they can be proud of and attract mates by doing these sort of things and find their right mate because they're doing something that they care about and they're meeting people who also care about that same thing. And I don't know.
I guess
You do.
what happens to the people who, this is what people usually ask. I agree. I couldn't agree more. What happens to the people who don't find that, or in this incarnation are slated to have a more difficult experience, and where do they fit in? Because I think that's unfortunately what a lot of people don't want to admit. And my overall point with this is, if anyone is going through that experience, you change it. That's how it works. You change it. There's no one's going to do this for you. That's the Jordan Peterson myth that people want. Oh, daddy's going to tell you what to do and then shit'll work out. Not how it works. Embrace the fucking chaos. Embrace the feminine shit where you don't know what the fuck is going to happen. You can get obliterated. You can get reborn. Who the fuck knows? Embrace that. Don't think there's some simple blueprint that's going to improve your life on a real substantial level. Because if there was, we would have found it. Jordan Peterson would have fucking found it. Do you know what I mean? Einstein, someone slightly smart. Yeah. I don't know. The culture is. I hear of people being bored a lot.
Yeah.
Which I've never had that problem. It's like, how are you?
We're of a different
bored?
generation. I think it's people that are younger than us that don't.
500 channels of a TV simulation.
Yeah, that's a great song. Listen to "Choking Victim," 500 channels. That's a great punk song that describes the whole situation we're talking about right now.
We have our entertainment spoon-fed to us, our easy access food spoon-fed to us.
Everything,
we
everything,
need.
and now we have jackasses like Jordan Peterson spoon feeding us a set of values that happens to
know.
fit perfectly with the angry young white man narrative.
That
of their
crypto
life.
shit is interesting. That intersection of crypto kids into Jordan Peterson. I hadn't thought of that. It
makes perfect sense to
But
me.
of course it does, yeah.
I don't know what you think about the culture, but the only thing that's bubbling up to the mainstream is how ridiculously decadent they're being, and
that was because
Lamborghinis.
that was Blockstream. So that was Consensus, this conference that just happened.
But it just feels like Silicon Valley all over.
It
It's
is.
like,
Those
it's a
people
bunch
are
of
morons.
bros with a bunch of money who are trying to make a new culture.
That's exactly
it's
what
like,
it is.
ugh.
And it's great. They partied at One Oak with Snoop. It's that. You get it. You laugh. You get
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I mean,
I
it's a-
retweeted that
it's
shit
a
because I was like,
joke.
this is so funny. I've been at One Oak. That. I've smoked blunts at One Oak. I know exactly. If that's what they're aspiring to, those people are idiots. meanwhile, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, since they had that little get together, which everyone thought would shoot everything up, shit's gone down. Those are morons. Those are people who probably already got in or have big enough positions where even if it doesn't go up, they could still do that shit. Those people are idiots, and they unfortunately give the majority of crypto a bad name because that's what people identify, that culture. It's permanent, but that's the same culture Jordan Peterson we're talking about, I guess. That is what dominates our media landscape, which is kind of a curated perspective we're getting of things, which is the Robert Anton Wilson thing, that we're only getting spoon-fed the majority of the stuff, even if we think we're not. We're getting the same algorithms. What do we see? The 30-year-old.
He calls it everyone has their own reality tunnel.
Yeah.
You know, and there's really nothing you can do about that.
Yeah. It's an interesting time.
The most interesting.
It seems like it.
The most interesting. I mean, at least in my life. I thought of things were wild and crazy back in 2000.
Shit was so not crazy when we were kids.
Well, it's also just happening so fast.
Yeah. That's the thing. That's what Robert Anton Wilson talks about in the acceleration of knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, how far it took the human race to get from one point to one point and then this point to the next. And it just keeps accelerating to the point where he left off that lecture in the 80s and he's talking about how we're doubling our knowledge every year. Now it's got to be happening every day. Minute. Yeah.
Something stupid.
A doubling of the knowledge that the human species possesses.
It's gonna... I wonder what level of evolution or de-evolution we're at right now. And I also just, to zoom out even more, wonder under what context this may kind of like illusory existence function is relative to our collective lives. Like, I think individually that's our job to figure out what we're here for and do. But like collectively, it seems like there are some broad themes that need to be dealt with. I wonder in our lives if we'll see substantial change. I mean, I guess we already have in some regards. I mean,
we have. I think about this a lot because it seems like right now is like an opportunity. I mean, because I think, what I'm talking about is the collapse of the American empire. We're witnessing it in kind of this slow motion train wreck. We don't want to acknowledge it kind of way.
Well, yeah.
And it's apparent in so many ways in the way we don't take care of people here.
At all.
And we got a gun to the world's head. And there's only so long you can rule with a gun to the world's head. So I think we're witnessing the collapse of the American empire. And it's like, what would replace this? What is going to bubble up? And,
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, weird fucking tribalism. Like, scary ass.
I don't know. It's like, I guess it's up to the kids. It's out of we're retired in our 30s.
This is honestly what I tell my parents all the time. They're like, no, it's going to be up to you. I'm like, oh, no. You guys don't realize how old I am. I'm 36. Like, it's up to people way younger
Passing
than me.
kick that can down the road.
And everything that we're saying right now that seems like, oh, whoa, huge stoner revelation is so baked into their being that, like, they're woke on a level that, like, we couldn't even, if we inhabited their consciousness for a second, we'd be like, whoa.
The question is,
pure
though,
light.
what percentage of them? Because, like we were saying, like Robert Anton Wilson says, everyone's in their own bubble. We're getting our own social media feeds. We're getting our own news sources. We're getting our own educations. Everything's different. So there's going to be different extremes of people. Mm-hmm. And it's going to, like, I don't know, we're not going to be able to find the truth. That'll be funny.
See, that to me is what's interesting, is that there's no guarantee that any of this stuff evolves into something more comprehensive or cohesive. Yeah. But I think what happens is that there are nodes that can be pulled off, and for like interest. This is like the whole Soul Pod Ram Dass thing, which I do think is wise, and it seems accurate when you meet certain people, that like you figure out how you make an impact for yourself and like a limited scope. That's why when I was asking politically what you do, I've never had the thought like, you know what, I'm going to run for office. That's what I'm going to do. Like, that's it. I have had the thought like, okay, if I find enough people who are kind of thinking like I'm doing, like there's probably only a finite amount of resources that many people would need to do something. And I'm meeting people. That server that I created is now like 80% sustainable, psychedelic, indigenous culture, like insane ways of thinking that are far beyond what I could come up. Like, I literally don't understand what most of these people are talking about, but like very plugged in members. I'm doing a podcast with another one. This shit is happening. Like, that shit is happening.
Right.
I think it happened with the tech people too. In the 2000s, a lot of those people who accumulated a lot of wealth and maintained it through the bubble and everything started thinking like this too. And I think that's where the psychedelics fits back in, because a lot of that culture is kind of plugged in. To me, I would hope, I don't know if it's accurate, and I have a segue here for this, that psychedelics have a positive impact on people becoming more compassionate de facto.
No, not necessarily.
That is where I say we don't know if this thing is going to come together. Have you guys done 5-MeO DMT?
No, I think the one we do. What's the other one?
NN-DMT.
That's what we do.
Have you tried to get 5?
Listen
to the podcast I did with this dude. Someone I know is going to do that with the toad. They do the extract, which is just like much more of it necessary. But the 5-MeO DMT shit is wild. I've never done it, but it's like 100 times stronger than DMT.
Wow, I cannot imagine what anything stronger than DMT could be.
I bring it up for a couple reasons. One is it sounds like everyone who does it reliably, and there's some mythology behind it that the people who found it purposely left it out of like all literature because they didn't want the government to ban it, and they didn't ban it until 2011. But it's so profound that they didn't want anyone to know. But apparently the reliable experience is God. Like no one's coming back and being like, oh, it was something else. It's like God.
What was that?
They're like God.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it, God. Interesting, made me really peak up about it. However, the guy I spoke to about it, Martin, who I really think is a very nice guy, was talking about non-dual awareness, had a very large ego, and it blew my mind that someone could have this reliable. He basically had then idolized 5-MeO DMT as the thing, the only real thing, and that was his whole contention. I'm like, dude, how do you not see
you're the thing?
I was like, this whole cosmology that you worked up, and I had a couple people hit me up and I'm like, dude, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was wasn't making sense to me. He was talking about this thing, and I'm like, well, are you enlightened? Did you hit it? So it's very interesting to me, because I think there are times when you can take psychedelics, depending on your circumstances, your affinity for Jordan Peterson or not, where it just doesn't have that shifting impact.
Absolutely.
And that to me is, does the Michael Pollan book, for the people who do the annual check-ins, just justify their belief in someone like Jordan Peterson because they just came into within an archetype? Or
it depends. I think I went into LSD. Well, I came out of LSD a communist, but and it wasn't.
Write that on a poster.
It's totally fine, but it actually just made me remember that I was a real revolutionary, and I probably have been for thousands of incarnations, and it just woke me up to that in this critical moment. So
for every one of you, that's probably worth. People who are just like, it's not for me. I agree.
But it started with an empathetic thing. It started with that flooding back into my world.
I feel like it has to do a little bit with dosage, too, because there's definitely times where, we did 300 our first time, and actually for that,
300 micrograms.
I'm really grateful, even though it's crazy and wouldn't necessarily be something I'd recommend. But I have a lot of gratitude that that's how we did it, because it was so much of it was so undeniable, and I was revealed so much that took a long time to integrate. But when I've done 100 mics, I'm like, oh, my ego is so here. I'm dancing with my ego in a different way, where there can be a little bit of a reinforcement happening. Yes. And because I've gone so far and I knew kind of what it's about, I was like, I'm not going to play that game as much as I probably would if I was, doing 100 mics for the first time, and that really being my only experience.
Yeah, well, the 100 micrograms is when you can grab your ego and you think oh, my ego is going to be what gets me through this. The stories I think about me, and that's what I think the ego is your story of you.
I got something to come back to. Yeah. Don't worry, I can be in this place, but I got something to come back to.
And if you somehow get through that 12 hours, white knuckle into your ego, it could come back out more reinforced. But that's a fucking tough trip. Most people want to have a good time and want to just let go. And for me, that was what was so profound. It's just oh, that thing, I don't need it. You shed it, and then there's still you. And it's this more pure, less scared version of you. And I'm that's what I want to take into the future. That's what I want to integrate into my life.
Well, you know what I think it is also is it doesn't necessarily make you a better person, but it heals trauma. And by healing, a lot of the things that we do that are hurtful to other people have to do with traumas that we have, So
That's a really good point. The healing trauma. I mean, I think we're in a traumatized culture, an individual and cultural existence.
Capitalism is trauma.
Well, being born is trauma. Like the actual birth is even trauma.
Yeah, when you get down to that.
I think
but
capitalism is bad. What are we defining capitalism as?
hyper competition. This is what we're in right
Yeah.
now. you
Yeah,
know?
that's no good. I agree. I agree.
Because it separates us and it makes everybody suspicious and paranoid and weird. And
the counter
sick.
argument would be then things wouldn't get improved and we'd have the bread lines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a lame argument.
I'm not
It's
putting it
not
out
based
there.
on anything because there's never been communism. It's never actually taken place, you know. And
yeah.
you know what socialism is us using the current system and changing laws to redistribute wealth. And communism is like when you've done socialism for long enough and you don't need laws or hierarchies or anything like that. It's the opposite of hyper competition. It's hyper cooperation. It's baked into who we are.
It's probably only going to happen in response to extreme conditions.
Yeah,
though.
of course.
Does a
Of course.
military fit in?
A
to-
military?
Yeah.
Fuck no. Hell fucking no. No way. No, like these are the first things we need to do is abolish the police state, abolish the police, abolish the military.
Well, any of these
Get our
systems
dick out of
that
every
like
hole
say
and-
that we have an enemy, you know, like
Yeah.
if you look at what happened in Holy Mountain or Holy Hell, or like what are these communes that happen, and where they go wrong is they start arming themselves with guns, having
I
some
agree with that,
perceived
yeah.
enemy.
The
And
otherization.
Well, that's the
and you
paranoia that creeps
Yeah,
in.
you manifest it, and you manifest your enemies, and you manifest the conflict.
And it horseshoes around from something that was very free and open to something that is completely fascism.
That does happen though, because I think there are evidences. I'm only speaking like this because I literally just listened to the Robert Anton Wilson, the conspiracy stuff. And I'm not a
know.
big conspiracy guy, but I find it compelling that he's right. If you read any account of history, all fucking conspiracies, like literally the whole thing is there was this conspiracy to throw over this conspiracy. And and it's like, oh shit, yeah, like makes sense. And then if you just think about human interactions, the most noblest among us in a year will probably lie hundreds of times about totally silly little different things. It's just like a fact of life.
Wow.
Whether it's just to a stranger on the street, how's your day going? You're having a shitty day. You see it. Whatever you want to classify as lies, it happens. So I think there is some level of conspiratorial work. I tend to fall in the category though that it just the organization level to maintain something. I think these systems, when we're defining capitalism, that operating system has been out of control. You're totally right. It's
obsolete.
fried. It's dying. We need something to replace it. I wonder what that is that helps us do it, because as much as I agree we shouldn't have a military, we shouldn't be perceiving other people as against us. Unless there's 100% consensus on that, then there will always be an argument that that's a fallacy. Not agreeing with that, but that is a valid argument from someone else saying, well, if there's that one person, they fucking stab everyone else. Like, that's not a good society to live in. So how do we bridge where we are as a society now, which is in the United States, at least, like hyper aggressive, critical, polarized, into something that's more, nurturing, welcoming.
Well, for me, I'm like we're seeing it unfold. It's happening very naturally. We're what I call right now. We're in a situation called the Great Humbling. Everything's coming to the surface. How awful we are, our bankrupt values, the whole thing. It's all coming out. How we treat people, and now it's all reported. Everybody's a little reporter with their cell phone, and everyone can tell stories and film the police brutality and film the murders and film all this stuff. And we're living in the Great Humbling, and I think
that's
what comes,
such a good term. The Great Humbling.
And I think what comes on the heels of that is the Great Healing, and that's where psychedelics really come in. And having ended the drug war, we're going to let psychedelics come back into the mix. People get to know each other. We break the shackles of being owned by the 1%, everybody working their asses off for God knows fucking what. And we start drawing back, apologizing to the world, being the world innovators in healing and humble.
All right, how do you
and
teach?
being humble.
I couldn't. You know me.
We do it through education. The
How do you do it
only
to
way
crypto
do it-
bros? Teach crypto bros. How do you teach
Oh,
someone like crypto bros? No, that's because it's so
It's
anachronistic to some. That's why I bring it up. That's why Jordan Peterson interests me so much, because
Yeah.
I recognize how distant that line of thinking is from my own. Not in like a I necessarily think these people are idiots for believing that, but I question how they can. How do you communicate with people like that?
A guy who wants a Lamborghini on the roof of his apartment?
Yeah.
How do I tell him,
Yeah.
you'd be better off
Yeah.
serving our community with that
Yeah.
money?
Yeah. How do we do that? Not like we have to do it in one fell swoop. Like you have a conversation and he's like, oh, I get it. Of course. Let me sell this Lamborghini and start donating. But I mean, like, what is the path towards that?
I think we have to incentivize that stuff, and not just in our laws, but like in our social contracts. You know, kindness has to be like the thing, the reason people have friends, the reason, you know, like cultural currency become acts of kindness, acts of generosity, giving it away. Those are the people we should be holding in high regard, not the people that hoard it and hoard their wealth. And
I wanted a cryptocurrency that did that. It was the only time I had an idea for a cryptocurrency, which the way it would work is, I don't have the exact mechanism, but by giving it away, more was generated and there would be a mechanism that burned amounts, so it wouldn't be like an infinite supply, which is just inflation. I have none of the specs worked out, but something that just did incentivize people to, because like people on our server, if they make a lot, like there are people that are very pot committed, we already talk about it. Like you have plans for different things. This isn't just so we can be like the shittiest rich people ever and have Lambos on our roof. I wonder how we get to the point where that culture that permeates and is seen as the apex of like Western materialism culture, Lambo on the roof. It's so crazy. It's just so silly because it's such like a ridiculous symbol.
we were witness to a very serious conversation about how are we going to get it up there? Is this what we want?
I mean, like that at that point, like I don't know. I'd probably have to interject myself into the conversation, not in like a nasty way at all, but just be like, are you guys really like what? Like, where'd you grow up?
It's just so
like,
easy
what is going on?
to categorize this type of thinking as like hippie, communist, get the fuck out of here. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to like it's been, this type of thinking has been, you know, eradicated in a lot of ways, you know, from normal everyday conversation. Giving it away is like, while we worship Jesus, we don't really want to be like him. You know, that's what Jesus would have done.
No one really wants to be like Jesus is the harsh reality. I lived like Jesus for a little bit. It was a very rude awakening into how the world actually works.
But it's also a beautiful awakening.
Oh, amazing. It was the best period of my life. But again, if everyone else isn't playing along, you end up into Jesus. That's not a good ending for Jesus if you want to be in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I these are the things I try to think about. I think I'm somewhere in between trying to figure out where creativity and financial liberty intersect for the majority of people, or enough people to make a change. That seems to be my area of focus right now, because we need as many people are with Lambos on the roof. We need people with like $12 million, $15 million, $20 million being like, hey, I know you're about your shit and you've been talking about doing this really fucking cool thing that has benefit for the world. No questions asked. If you fuck it up, I don't care. Don't make your life worse with it. I trust you enough to do that. Boom. That shit happens. There are billionaires out there doing that for people, and it's probably having a positive impact on
I think we got to get away from that mentality that the capitalists and the ultra fucking rich billionaires are going to save us if they would just themselves redistribute their wealth. They're not going to. They're going to have to take it by force.
But that's how by force, though, is the question.
Well, first you try through laws, and then you do it through revolution, and we're very capable of that, and we're armed for it. And, like, all I'm saying is if we educate people properly, we're not going to need the military that we have. We're not going to, like, who are these crooks? Who are these people running our country?
What's going to happen first, I think, is because we're finding that the government is now in a state of such incompetence, we are giving it over to corporations, and it's going to be more direct. It's not going to be like they have to pay off, or use lobbyists or pay off politicians. It'll just be like, oh, yeah, well, Amazon's done right by us. We get our products in time. We love whoever we talk to, Alexa, and let's hand it all over.
Amazon's more powerful than certain countries.
Yeah.
This should be disturbing. We shouldn't say, oh, what if Jeff Bezos would do this, that, and the other thing? No. Why don't we demand as people universal basic income so we can be artists, so we can sow good seeds for the next generation?
How do we demand that?
demand universal basic income. Well, you start doing it on a very local level. There's places that are doing it. Alaska does it. Alaska gives money to its citizens because they have so much revenue from their oil.
I think Fort Worth, Texas does it too.
There's a town in California doing it. You know, you start to figure out ways slowly but surely to redistribute the
You got to
wealth.
get the wealth, though, right?
Fuck yeah.
Well, I think it's just finding out that it's better for everyone if we house the homeless. You know, these are people who can be a part of our society, and if we just give people a little.
I couldn't agree
And then
more.
just take that idea further, and you end up at universal basic income.
Yeah.
I agree. I always wonder about the bridges and how the roads are actually
We gotta
paved
fight.
to get there.
We got to fight because the money exists, the wealth exists, and we got to get over to, as Cass tells me when I'm freaking out in my personal life, get over to an abundance model.
Yeah, no. We have the same freakouts, apparently.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, I think and this is the whole thing. And if we weren't such men of high moral character, we might be into Jordan Peterson because it's stressful as fuck to be a man and have to fucking be financially responsible.
It's very stressful.
And, you know, trying to bring a family into this world and trying to do the right thing.
It's unnecessary. Here's the thing. It's not that it's stressful. You need to have stress in your life. You need to have things that kind of, what I would define as healthy, shaping, character building stress. Not in the Jordan Peterson way, but some level of uncomfortability to make you do something you might not do otherwise. That's okay. Unnecessarily imposing artificial limits on people's ability to earn a living wage and raise a family is cockamamie.
That's what we're doing.
My whole thing is, so I'm not settled on this, but my bet is on cryptocurrency to leverage the people who have taken advantage of a system and created a system to extract wealth from people and make them buy into this weird system that we are in. I think that's a decent way to pull enough wealth from there. That's the war that I see.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of many battles within the bigger war, the war for the future of humanity. Are we going to get free, or
How do
are
we
we
do
going
it,
to stay
though?
enslaved?
How do we do? Because politics is, you just said it, it's infected. It's 100%.
Because this system ain't going to fucking serve us. Do you need a president? I don't.
No,
So, what
it's
the
not.
fuck?
But you and I are probably considered far radicals in believing that we probably don't need a president.
That's fine. That's fine. Everyone will come around to these ideas. These ideas will seem center 10 years from now.
You think 10 years?
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Man, I want to
yeah.
live in your world.
Well, I'm telling you, because my world is going around this country
It
and
is.
seeing the most desperate situations and
That's
seeing
true. That's true.
we're living and we're watching our brothers and sisters fucking die.
But it led to Trump too, in some
It
regard,
did.
right?
It did, and we've talked to people. Man, I had this crazy conversation with a guy. Conversation's gonna be in my next movie.
Cool.
Went up to this guy who was had one leg and he was begging on the side of the BQE, and I was like, "What's your story?" And he said, it was just a 1-minute conversation. He said, I got an infection. I went to the doctor. They fucked up. They amputated my leg. Lost my job because of it. End up living in my car doing this now. And I was like, wow. And he goes, but fuck them. I voted for Trump. And then he just walks off with
Yeah,
his
you feel
sign.
me?
Because, he's been fucked so hard by this country that was the biggest fuck you
Right.
that he could ever imagine. And he's not as informed. He's living in his car and having to fucking get by day to day. He's not as informed about the high level corruption and all that stuff.
He doesn't need to be though.
Trump was
right?
just a symbol of fuck you.
But that's my point. I think he was,
And that's
more-
why I respect it. In that moment, I was like, I get it. I don't.
Yeah,
I would never
no.
do it myself, but I get what these people were doing. They're scared shitless. They've been fucked. They've been put through it by this country.
They believe him when he says we're going to drain the swamp, though, rather than it just be the swamp.
That's
like,
my
he
point.
is the
Yeah.
swamp.
Yeah.
That's my point. Is with this nebulous thing that now we call the truth, which used to be relatively easy to identify. Like, don't lie, publicly, and contradict yourself in a bad, stupid way. Don't do that. Aren't really held to any of those same, esteems anymore. This is why someone like Jordan Peterson can proliferate so much. His media, because he hedges this stupid line where it makes him seem by being just not like the worst of the worst and kind of justifying it intellectually that he's somehow moderate or like not that stupid or not that
Yeah.
bad. So I don't know. The war on truth is something that I didn't really anticipate. I thought the internet would make it somewhat easier to find truth, and I think in some ways it is, but you have to cultivate that like bullshit
Yeah.
detector, which might be a privilege. We don't know.
It is. Well, I mean, I think that poverty is truth, and that cuts through no matter what anyone's telling you, no matter what politicians saying what. Poverty is truth, and a lot more people are living in it. And this is the only country in the whole world where people go bankrupt from having something go wrong with their health. And what about the way we live here in America would help somebody have a healthy life? Like, it only
Right.
drives them to an early death. And you know, all I'm saying is none of it's served us, and it's all based on faith.
agree.
We have faith that we're going to vote for these people, and they're going to go to Washington and do our bidding. They're all doing the bidding of the corporations. They're
Yeah.
all doing the same game.
I agree.
It's a fake the whole thing's fake. The two parties, they're the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And it would be so easy. And I realized this on acid. It's all based on faith. We just believe this. We believe this thing, so we all put our money into it. And 60% of our taxes go to keeping a gun to the world's head and not taking care of our own. We can decide to not believe in that anymore. Look what
yeah.
the teachers are doing. The people could do that in general. We could have a general strike. That would change things. We could change the whole system. We could take everything
People aren't
down
ready
and
for
start
that.
over.
People are not ready. I don't think we're
No,
at
we're
the
not, because
point.
we're little brats, because
Yeah.
we're hypnotized with our comfort. But the whole thing is, when you're really walking the walk through this country and you're seeing some third world shit go on here in America, it's disturbing. And for me, I can't put the genie back in the bottle. I can't unsee that stuff and then say, oh no, I'm fine, whatever, I'll just keep accumulating wealth. I'm like, no, fuck this, man. We got
Yeah.
to turn this shit around. We got to start caring about each other.
That's the most
We
important.
got to start caring about each other. And not give a fucking $1.5 trillion gift to the donor class.
But that is what continues to happen because the rules are sufficiently set up to enable that. So
who made those rules?
No.
Fuck those
Oh,
rules.
of course, no. And the truth is that the Constitution is against like. There's nothing in the Constitution. It's like, yeah, corporations should have undue influence on. Like that's specifically not in there. So it's
The
not.
Constitution was written by a fucking bunch of white men, crooks, 55 guys that were all landowners. I don't think we should believe in that. They weren't the people by any means. I
Hey,
think
but
we should question every one of those motherfuckers.
Alexander Hamilton, pretty sweet. He didn't write it. He came afterwards. In
Yeah,
fairness, he
yeah.
came afterwards, and he wasn't born in this country. But he's pretty sweet. Yeah, I know. I know exactly how you feel. I
I don't believe in this country anymore.
actually still
I believe in the
do.
people more than ever, and that's why I can spout this stuff, because I think we'll all wake
border-
up to it.
Yeah, okay.
I
Here's
don't believe in the American empire. I don't believe in what we stand for.
what do you think, Cass?
Can we pause it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cass.
I think that we're going to see heaven and hell no matter where we go and whatever direction this goes in. And I hope that we can all live more harmoniously, especially within this country and especially globally. And I personally think that has to do with, tearing down borders and boundaries in our own hearts and the walls that we have between each other, the walls that we have between our families, our communities, our countries, and seeing ourselves all as like more not only in harmony but in a oneness, in a recognizing in each other who we really are. And I think that's a place that we can get to. I do, however, think it will be met with an equal amount of hell.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's just I trust in the balance of the universe.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it doesn't make me strive to not want to be better or
Yeah,
be
totally.
optimistic about where we're going. But
Do you believe in the America, Noah?
The America? No, I don't. I barely believe in the Noah. Do you know what I mean? Like
that's true, yeah.
Like I obviously, as a practical matter, I think the United States. The more I found out about its history, really through Alexander Hamilton, it was pretty fucking cool at one point. The founders of it, like Jefferson, for the most part, Washington, who a lot of people want to shit on because he was one of the founding fathers. He freed every one of his slaves as soon as he died, and he had them primarily because he was kind of embedded into a financial, like this was his life. If he had freed them while it was going on, we never would have had this country. Good shit wouldn't happen at some point down the timeline. Unfortunately, it was continuing a tradition of pretty ruthless bloodlust, just super aggressive, patriarchal dominance, which is not good. So I don't really believe in the idea of America and the United States. I think without borders, it would be a lot better if we recognize each other as human beings, which I think is why New York is so nice in a lot of ways, is it is in some ways borderless, even though it's inside the United States. There's so many different cultures and people you can meet from economic backgrounds and places in the world that like you get a better idea that your little slice of the world isn't the whole thing. So yeah, I think that we're going to move towards something, but I also see the entrenched system as being way more powerful than people think it is, in terms of that even if the people theoretically and technically have the ability to rise up and overthrow something like this, the bottom line of what the radical differences in their lives to them would seem like they would have to do for the majority of people is something most people won't do.
It's not desperate enough yet.
It's not desperate enough. And I don't think it's going to get to the point of desperation, because I think the other hedge of that is that we do marginally make increases as society and a culture that so maybe it goes back to like this hellish kind of not great place, but we've made a higher low in a certain point. And I think that's kind of what I think at this point. And I think I don't envision it could happen. There's a lot of things I didn't envision, but I don't envision a United States not existing in our lifetime, which means that if it does exist, it probably is going to be some type of permutation of what exists now, which, if it evolves into a vehicle where the only stuff we're bombarding people with is like, be a better person, like, maybe that's like some weird kind of authoritarian regime.
Well, kind of like what Germany's had to do post World War II.
Yeah, like be a better country. Don't be, and Germany still has a wing of people who don't want any immigrants in there, and are
Well, yeah, of course, but I mean, they like remind people about those sort of things.
Yeah, and I mean, so I think that the United States has the potential to do that, because the other cool thing about the United States is some of those cultures that were oppressed and continue to be oppressed continue to germinate and figure out their own freedoms that are inherent upon them. And that makes this country a more complicated but potentially better web of, places to be a beacon for change and hope. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Who the fuck knows, man?
Well, some things are really easy. It's end the wars and burn the prisons and, feed the homeless and house the homeless.
I think people should care about that more, and I think it's a meme and like a line of thought that should probably proliferate, especially if people have the means to do it, because it's an easy thing to do. Like if something flashes across your screen and you can trust the person who's been posting it about whether it's a personal or, demographic, geographic disaster or something, donate like $9. That's what I do. Just $9. Like you don't have to be a hero about it. And it's not about the praise. It's just like, all right, if I can spare this shit regularly, hopefully it has some impact. And then that also inevitably leads you to being a little more concerned about what you're potentially looking at in the world. So it's a vehicle for that too. So, all right. This was a long podcast.
Hour and 23.
We did it.
Did we do it? Yes.
I'm a proud American.
Yeah, the Proud American Podcast here.
That's what we'll rename it to after this. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having
Noah.
us.
All right.
Peace and love.
Sean and Cass, they're the greatest. Go check them out. Very 8 Podcast, very8.tv. Sign up for their newsletter. It's actually pretty cool. It's something you wouldn't mind getting in your inbox, to be honest. I don't mind getting it, and I hate email. So, yeah, Patrick Nemchek continues to be the man when speaking of patrons. Makes up a large share of that donation amount, and I appreciate it. Appreciate the support, man. Everyone else, you're cool too. Don't worry. I got love for you too. Thanks for listening to the show. I'll see you next week. I got not a ton. I have enough episodes in the can that they will be coming in regularly. So stay tuned for that. And a lot of in-person ones. I'm trying to make, put a premium on the in-person ones. I really enjoy those. And I think they're just of a magnitude a little bit higher. Not shitting on the other ones because sometimes that's how you do it. But I just really enjoy getting together with people. Okay, that's it. I will see you next week.